Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I sit down with Ewan Corlett. Ewan is a therapist based in the UK. In this episode, Ewan shares his own journey of dealing with addiction, finding a men's group, and going on a journey of healing through breathwork. Ewan and I discuss the value of attending men's groups and how that can enable transformation and growth. Ewan also shares his own experience of working with men and some of the tools he uses with his clients. I really hope you can get a lot out of this episode, and if at the end you can leave a 5-star review, I would truly appreciate it. All right, Ewan, thanks for joining the Easy Conversations podcast. I appreciate you taking the time. And super grateful for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation today. We've been kind of talking a little bit offline here and there, so it's been great to connect with you. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and maybe touch on a little bit of the work you're doing in the space of working with men.
Sure thing, man. Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, Furkan.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here talking to you. So I'm a therapist, and I work with men and women, though I'm moving across to working more predominantly with men. Predominantly work with various presentations of trauma, specifically addiction. And I think the reason that I tend to attract clients who are looking to recover or start their recovery from addiction or grow more within their recovery is because that's been my own journey. And, specifically realizing that working with men moving forward is a growing passion, although I don't completely work solely with men yet at this stage. But having recently started a men's group, I'm learning more about what it is to lead men emotionally, lead men back into their bodies. And really, it's been my own journey, so I feel inspired and motivated to pass that on.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, I mean, do you mind touching on that a little bit? Like, what was your journey like in terms of, getting in touch with your body, and then how are you helping other men do that as well?
Okay, yeah. So, about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I started to dip my toe in and out of American men's groups. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. I've been in 12-step recovery for over 10 years, abstinent from drugs and alcohol. And having felt that I'd got a certain level in, let's say, my spiritual growth, but realizing that emotionally there was a lot more that I wasn't yet conscious to. Yeah, I wasn't processing and feeling and releasing. And the men's group that I attended, something quite profound happened for me, where I felt so held by these other men that just in witnessing them, parts of me that were laying more dormant consciously started to come forward, and I found myself breaking down, like emotionally breaking down. And that was so powerful for me, so powerful. And this was all at the time of I think lockdown had just started, or COVID was present, and then lockdown was about to start. I got rushed to hospital. They found a tumor in my stomach. It's a long story, but the long story short, there was no cancer, but I had to wait 6 months for this tumor to be removed. I had to move my therapy work online, and I went into fight and flight. I went into a massive state of fight and flight, and I didn't really realize how much that was taking place at the time. But with reflection, I was incredibly scared, and I wasn't fully processing that emotion. And being in the men's groups enabled me to gradually acknowledge that. And then I had the operation, and that just opened my whole body up to deeper layers of trauma that I had. I mean, the operation in itself was traumatic.
Yeah.
But it really opened me up to my developmental trauma and PTSD. And I'd never really used the term PTSD, but now I would say that it's complex, very
Hmm.
complex PTSD. So I began to, I took on a coach, Mike Sagoon, who's incredible, who empowered and led me to lead myself back into my body. I began to become interested in breath work and more. I'd always been interested, well, for some time I've been interested in somatics, somatic experiencing, and I've always been interested in mindfulness and meditation since coming into recovery.
Yeah.
But it was now, particularly in the work I did with Mike, that I started to learn to drop into my body, to connect with the sensations in my body, to listen, and allow trapped energy to continue to move and
Hmm.
to shake, to scream, to do a lot of which I now understand is embodiment work. You know, work that um, just kind of happened for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hadn't seen it. You know, it's quite in the last year or so. The shift has been quite profound for me. So so yeah, coming home to the body. Really, I mean, like to sum it all up, coming home to my body, which is me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We are our body, and it's like I didn't realize how much you know I lived in my head. I knew I lived in my head, but to what extent, has really become prevalent in the last year or so.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. And I think before we even started this, we talked about listening to our bodies and how important it is. I mean, you don't really appreciate how much trauma is stored in the body itself. And we continue to get these messages, and seldom do we listen and do something about it. And until you don't start listening to your body, you don't notice a change. You just, you keep putting this vehicle through so much,
Mm.
and seldom listen to it. So I'm glad you've been able to come to that, and go through that journey. And now you're obviously sharing it with other men. And what are
Yeah,
some of the things you're teaching them, the men that you work
yeah,
with?
yeah. Thanks, and I'll answer that question. I just want to touch on the fact that I've been a qualified therapist for a few years when I came into this situation, and it's like I thought I knew so much
Hmm.
from I mean I'd only been qualified and practicing for a few years, but I thought I knew so much, and this really flipped everything on its head, and it was like, okay, right, so trauma healing, and I knew I was healing, but I didn't know to the depths. Trauma healing is a bottom up approach.
Hmm.
It requires a bottom up approach. So that kind of leads into your question, which is teaching men to drop into their bodies, to be present with whatever sensations exist, to invite a conversation with those parts, and thinking of sensations in the body as parts of self,
Hmm.
right? And this is a kind of way that I kind of relate it to. So um, what's my gut? My gut is tense right now. Okay, just being curious about that sensation, being with that sensation. If that sensation could speak, what might it say? Allowing the energy to do whatever it wants to do,
Hmm.
um, and usually that creates large shifts where emotion will come forward, sadness or fear or guilt or whatever it may be, grief, which for me has been the hugest of emotions that I've very much been processing going back a year for a good few months.
Yeah.
Um, so really teaching men to be present, to relax, to slow down, to become more receptive and open to what's happening in their body, so that they can connect with their body
Hmm.
and resultingly be more relaxed, open, and connected um, with those around them. And I'm just sort of recalling earlier today I was looking at some everyman stuff.
Yeah.
As I recently, that was one of the men's groups that I dipped in and out of, but have recently joined.
Yeah.
And they talk about the rock formula, which is, relaxed, open, and connected. We have to relax. We have to learn to relax, to calm down, and then to become open to what's happening. And when we do that, we feel more connected to ourselves, and therefore we can feel more connected to those around us, because we've been so conditioned and trained to live within our minds, tense, defended, and closed, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the model of manhood that many of us were conditioned in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, that's great. Thanks for elaborating on that. And I think for me personally, I'm also, training in psychology, and one of the areas I'm passionate about, and the reason why I can relate with everything you're saying, is childhood trauma, and how that manifests itself into our adult life, and how we carry that trauma around with us. And I think it's really important to be mindful of it and do the work to be able to heal. As you mentioned, the healing is so important, and you've been on this healing journey for about a year or so. What are some of the challenges you see when you're working with men in terms of carrying that trauma around, whether it's from childhood or something that may have happened recently?
So, I mean, using myself as an example, having been in recovery from addiction for over 10 years, and for the first 8+ years of those, being in talking therapy, sitting in groups, practicing mindfulness and meditation, all of these things, and then crossing over through the result of present trauma from fear of death,
Mm-hmm.
um, operation, energetic, opening the whole body up to feel. What I realised is how incredibly resourceful the mind is at survival, right? At
Mm-hmm.
blocking everything out to survive. Um, and with that, in answer to your question, is helping men to understand the patterns that have existed, that have been built up, that prevent them from connecting with their body and prevent them from living within their authenticity. And joining, I think there has to be a cognitive element initially with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of men, because opening up fully. So, like with myself again, right? There was years of leading up to the point where I was able to snap pretty much. I would say I pretty much had a breakdown in order to break through,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I had a lot of therapy for many years, and have sat in safe spaces for many years. So I was already at an advantage. If someone is coming in to the work and they haven't yet learned to feel safe, or don't know what that feels like, it might take a bit longer, and we take a gentler approach. We might need to do quite a bit of talking and exploration to build some trust,
Mm-hmm.
or saying, right, we're going to go straight into the body. And I suppose what I'm really saying there is, like, for me, it's about understanding the individual that steps forward and asks for help, getting a view of their journey to the point that they are cognitively aware,
Mm-hmm.
um, using my experience to be able to see what their body is saying to me,
Yeah.
the degree of fidgeting, the degree of eye contact, so on and so forth, all the visual cues that I'm getting, to be able to go, okay, it looks like and it feels like this person has a deep amount. Okay, well, we need to maybe take it steady here,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? I think also what I've learned in the breath work that I've been doing in the last year is how breath work, that we need the right type of breath work for the individual, because some breath work can be re-traumatizing and open up PTSD in the body. And if we haven't already got a solid foundation in knowing how to feel safe and communicate with ourselves, then that can be really, really stressful. So I suppose my answer to that question is really taking each individual as they come, and then
Mm-hmm.
tailoring, having a process. Right, we need to connect with the body, we need to relax, we need to get more present with what's going on in our body so we can listen to the wisdom of the body. But also, um, that might require, with some people, more of an exploration of some past
Mm-hmm.
stories. And I kind of,
Yeah.
this is what I'm moving to. I'm still in the process of kind of designing what, because I'm a therapist, but I want to deliver um, 3-month packages to men
Mm-hmm.
who, because I do believe the coaching approach with men can be highly effective, because I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced that for myself.
Yeah.
Um, Tailoring an approach that provides therapeutic support alongside a structured coaching um, process. I'm still in
Yeah.
the process. Yeah, I'm still in the means of figuring that out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing. And I guess one of the things you really touched on that was I think I want to explore a bit further is the concept of breathing, right? So you constantly hear people say, okay, breath work is really important for you, and
Mm,
you know, it has a lot of value. But you also mentioned that it doesn't really work for everyone because it may open up that PTSD or trauma that they're
mm.
storing. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
how does
Okay.
breathing can
Yeah. So I think from thinking from the nervous system perspective, you know, um, from our sympathetic nervous system, our fight and flight system, and our
Mm-hmm,
parasympathetic rest and restore. I think what I realized from my experience is that because of the level of trauma, I needed to start off with a lot of rest and restore, calm breathing
mm-hmm,
to learn to drop into my body, and that's what I received. But then I also received alongside that um, sympathetic breathing, which triggered fight and flight, but holotropic breathing in particular, which
mm-hmm,
opened up my subconscious, which enabled the trauma to move to be released.
mm-hmm,
For me to let go of my thinking mind, the egoic mind, and just shake and release, which was great. And if you haven't got a huge amount of trauma or PTSD in your system, fine. But what I realized is I have,
mm-hmm,
and that became really intense, really intense. Um, to the point where I'm having a lot of morning depression, a lot of, and the way I understand that now is that the parts of the unconscious parts of myself from infancy that felt incredibly traumatized and unsafe
mm-hmm.
came into the driving seat and were um, coming so far forward in me that they were blocking out my adult self. And at times I would feel kind of lost, very much lost, depressed, and deeply sad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that was part of the healing process. So it's like it's not it's not a it's not a negative thing. Um, I have the foresight to understand how that I need more support, and because of the work I do, I understood what was happening.
Yeah.
I was able to guide myself through it a lot with that support. I suppose what I'm saying is, if you go straight into a very powerful breath work that stimulates the fight and flight, it has the potential to open up your whole body to
Mm-hmm.
your PTSD, and then you're potentially going to feel very unsafe in that because it's going to come flooding forward. And
Right.
if you haven't yet got the tools to know how to relate to yourself within that and continue to ask for support, etc., then that could potentially be really quite dangerous, actually,
Mm-hmm.
I think, for the individual. And I don't think what I'm learning is that breath work is huge out there,
Yeah.
from my perception, and it has the potential to completely transform the human race. But I think we really need to be educating all of you know, educating for everybody's different mental state who might be
Mm-hmm.
entering into that practice,
Yeah. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a very important distinction, and I'm glad you kind of broke it down in that sense because, you know, most people kind of just hear about breath work and you almost consider it, oh, that's you hear about the value of it, the benefits, and you don't really factor in that for everyone there needs to be a tailored approach. And like you said, if you don't have all the tools, you can be putting yourself more at risk rather than the benefit piece. So understanding all of it is really important. Um, and another theme, like as part of this podcast, what I've started discovering is all the people that are doing this type of work, like yourself, of service. It ultimately starts from your own journey of adversity, and you've obviously had your own share. Do you mind talking about getting to that point where you were like, okay, I need to make a change, but after going through your own journey, wanting to give back and help others as well and serve?
Yeah. So I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 3 months from my 30th birthday. I'm 40 now, and I'd really, I lost myself in addiction from a very young age. From like 12, 13, I started smoking cannabis and drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and my life throughout my teens, my life was purely about getting out of my head, getting out of myself. You know, under the illusion that it made me, drinking and using made me funnier, more likable. I felt disconnected from myself.
Mm-hmm.
When I took drink and drugs, I felt connected to myself, some form of what I
Yeah.
thought was myself, right? And others. So my life became about that. And I squandered my potential. I fell into a job. I mean, I did stuff. I traveled, but I was always under the influence. And, it really brought me to my knees, to the point where I was going to lose my job and girlfriend at the time. And um, no one really wanted to have anything to do with me because I was
Mm-hmm.
volatile.
Yeah.
One minute I was your best friend, next minute I want to rip your head off. So I was very lost. I was very alone, and for the last few years of my drinking, I was very isolated. I just shut myself off from the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And coming into recovery, 12-step fellowship completely transformed my life. It gave me a safe space to be able to feel seen. It gave me a structured program to live by, taught me how to take responsibility, how to live a spiritual life of love and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Really began to show me who I really am, who I really always had been. Um, and then I was, I was continued to climb in the job that I was in, which was large format graphics. And I became a manager, and I was more stressed out, and I was more unhappy. And I'm like, what is this? Is this what life is about? Is this what recovery is about?
Yeah.
And I started to ask myself some fundamental questions, which I'd never asked myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what am I most good at? What are my my best qualities and skills? And really realised that people was what I love and
Mm-hmm.
what I'm good at, and the environment and this sort of stuff, and wrote a list of potential careers down. And counselling was what I uh, I liked the idea of the most, and went and did an evening class. And you could say the rest was history. I spent the next 4 years training and working at the same time. I worked part time for the British Red Cross and recovery rehab
Mm-hmm.
whilst I was getting my qualifications, and then started my private practice. And I've done a lot of work with youth agencies and stuff like that as well along the way. And so it was this passion for what a bit of a cliche, to give back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I've realised in the last, it's funny because I started my private practice 3 years ago. 3 years ago, yeah, 3 years ago, and not really actually wanting to move away from addiction. Like,
Yeah.
everything in my world's about addiction. Like, I don't want to work with addiction.
Yeah.
I don't, like, it's almost running away from the thing that the universe or God or whatever you want to call it was saying. This is what you're here to do. This is,
Yeah.
um, and just always being met with clients with addiction
Yeah.
serious addiction issues and and trauma presentations of disassociation, PTSD, and all varying presentations of
Mm-hmm.
that. So what I kind of realized, and this is in the last 6 months or so as well, because I created this concept of young men evolution, wanting to help young men.
Yeah.
And I'm still passionate about that, but I'm kind of parking it because it's like I can't run away from purpose. Like I might want to do this and I want to do that, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, but like and kind of leans into what you're really asking me is that the thing that I'm most well equipped to serve in is my story, right?
Yeah.
It's like the jewel in the crown that I have to help others learn to heal themselves is my story. And that's powerful. So it's about time I started owning that. And that's
Yeah.
really, you know, really what's happening at the moment for me is understanding, yeah, I have had a lot of trauma in my childhood, in
Mm-hmm.
my birthing trauma, a lot of disassociation. Well, throughout my whole childhood, disassociation, um, um, beginning to own that, learn it, heal it, um, and therefore pass my learnings and my healing on to others through therapy and coaching, and also just by sharing my story, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where we met on Instagram. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of Instagram, is that the power of an individual sharing their story can be transformative for others, and we all rise in that healing
Mm-hmm.
together. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And I think it's, like you said, there is power in sharing your story. I think what it allows, I look at it in different aspects, but what it allows is it makes us all human because we're all
mm,
flawed. But it also removes that shame and judgment for other people. When someone like yourself is able to come forward and say, hey, these are all the mistakes I made, or these are all the things I've had to go through to be able to learn and share with others, right?
yes.
And it's being able to distinguish that none of us are experts. Even if we have a story, even if we have a journey we've been through, we're still not experts. We're still figuring it out. But how can
Yeah.
we help others come along on this journey of transformation and growth? And that's, I think, the beauty of it all, right?
Definitely, definitely, and that's an interesting topic. That is definitely the beauty of it, that we are all one in that healing. That by sharing our story, we can break down the walls of shame, especially as men. I
Mm-hmm.
think which is something that I'm passionate about from regards to helping young men, and will open the door to more. The thing that I just got moving forward, but the thing I got from what you just said there. Um, is really how, as a practitioner, um, for me, it's been tricky, and because in a therapy relationship, I really wouldn't disclose much of myself at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in the Instagram world, it's like, okay, I'm going to bring myself forward, and like, where's the line in that? What is healthy? What is the right amount to engage from that perspective, and then understanding from a coaching perspective that it's just normal to bring your whole life out onto the stage, so to
Yeah.
speak, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I love the idea of this kind of coaching openness.
Mm-hmm.
I love therapy, so it's like, well, this is where I'm at in this kind of transition of like, do I want to take more of a coaching approach, combining my knowledge and practice from therapy. Um, so this is an interesting kind of phase and juncture that I'm in at the moment of what is therapy, what is coaching, where
Yeah.
are the lines? Because coaching is healing, right?
Yep.
Right. Therapy can be coaching. There, I think we're all on the same mission to help each other heal, like you said, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it's a bit semantics, I think, but I suppose what I'm saying for myself is that I don't want to come across as the as though I'm hiding behind my profession.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
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 and that's kind of something I kind of dabbled with too. And Like during COVID, I became a coach, got my certification, and then started studying in psychology to become a therapist. And it's trying to, like you said, find that right
Okay.
balance. And for me, I think you could do both. The way I've tried to present it is like through the therapy, I want to help clients or people I'm working with to understand the past. And then using
Hmm.
coaching is to build the future, right? Like set goals
Yeah.
for yourself. How do
Yeah.
you, once you've understand the past, what are you going to do now in the present to set yourself up for a better future
Yeah.
or improve on that? So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I love that. How simplistic it need only be that simplistic,
Yeah.
really, isn't it? So it's like um, you've really spoken to what it is I'm trying to bring forward, and just the way you put that actually helps me because it really is that straightforward, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
don't see any reason why we can't deliver a service that combines that. It's just what label you put on it,
Yeah.
really, isn't it? And being realistic with clients about what the work is, and that's something that I think is so important, and that's something that maybe can get blurred in the healing and helping world. And what I take very seriously is about, well, if I'm going to deliver something, then I need to have done my best to understand the potential implications of that for the person I'm trying to help.
Yeah.
You know, because it could potentially, we last thing we want to do is re-traumatize. You know, I mean, I think there has to be an element of that to heal, but it's that the individual feels safe and able to contain themselves within that. And I think that's like you said, you have that therapy knowledge to back that up, so that you know that you're holding that for them,
Hmm.
and you feel confident in letting go of them, so that they can, alongside the coaching in that process, right?
Yeah.
So the two are moving as one, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and what label can we stick on it?
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of it, and the important thing, what I wanted to touch on lastly, and I think you mentioned it early in terms of what helped you with your journey, and there is a lot of most of the guests I've been talking to, they've all been somewhat part of men's groups, and the
Mm,
importance of that. It's what I want to highlight for listeners is, and I think you touched on it too, is that sense of community you feel, the connection you feel, the sacred space that is held when you're part of these groups, when you show up, and being vulnerable, and how important that is when you have that community of men you can trust.
mm,
And it's really important for not only for your transformation but your growth. But in your case, it also helped with your healing. Um,
yes.
is that like, do you want to share a little bit of what that journey was like in being part of the men's group?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be completely honest when I share. I mean, I went to, initially it was the Unshakable Man,
Yeah.
and I kind of dipped my toe in and out. I didn't really become a solid cohesive part. I kind of went in, opened up, came back, went back in,
Yeah.
and then the same with Every Man. Kind of dip my toe in, come back out, dip my toe in, and it was only recently that I've made the commitment to actually join Every Man, and actually, because I was sitting on the fence, you see, of like, well, they're a group that's based in America. How's that going to work with timings and everything? And they're not really being that many places that speak to me in the
Hmm.
UK. So anyway, long story short, I've made that commitment, so I'm part of that, and also dip my toe into a couple of other ones, but haven't fully committed there either. So commitment, that's what, as I say it to myself, I say it to the listener, you know, just making that commitment every week to show up is huge. The men's group that I'm starting to build, which is hopefully going to become a home group. So it really feels like there's, these 8 guys. We show up for each other every week. Um, Gradually, as time moves on, I begin to take a step back, and everyone takes a place of leadership. Um, is already, like, just by me leading that is already providing me with a consistency. But that's really been me as a facilitator. And uh, one of my issues throughout life is not taking all of the support and having the commitment to what I need, so
Hmm.
that I can show up powerfully for
Hmm.
others. You know, so like having someone hold space for me once a week is a commitment that I make to myself now, because I need people to hold space for me. I'm spend all my life holding space for others. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah. I mean, initially it's going to feel uncomfortable. It did for me, showing up in a group of men in that vulnerability, but very quickly it levels out, and you're like, oh right, okay, I
Yeah.
can acknowledge things that I've never acknowledged before. I can gradually feel safe to express my truth. And yeah, if there's one thing I would recommend to any man above all things, it would be to join a men's group.
Hmm. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like you said initially, it's really hard to be that vulnerable, but I think that just comes with who we are as men. We always have our guard up. I think it's
Yeah.
really important to build that trust and feel that safety. And the reason why I'm touching on that is I'm, in the process of starting my own group here locally, because we don't
Awesome.
really have something similar. And I think it's really important because, every man I talk to who's kind of in their own journey of struggle, but also trying to figure out, how to define their purpose or
Mm,
understand themselves better. And I think when you're in that circle, you're able to explore that together. And like I said, once you have that community, you can transform and grow together as well. So that's
definitely.
why I'm really passionate about it too, and interested in hearing, a little bit about your journey. So I'm glad you shared that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, man. Yeah, and good luck. Good luck with setting that up. It's beautiful, isn't it? I was
Yeah,
just thinking, like what Carl Rogers says, like we can only take someone else as far as we've taken ourselves,
yeah,
and the unfolding journey never ends. And what a beautiful thing that is, to be able to show up powerfully in what we've learned, and parts of ourselves that we've healed, that the next man hasn't yet got to, and we just pass that on freely. And healing. Someone posed a question of like, healing costing money. Healing should be free, and yeah, like healing should be God given, right? But
yeah,
at the same time, like if we're showing up as a therapist or a coach or whatever, and we're giving our time, then there needs to be a financial transaction in that. And I'll kind of going off piece there,
yeah,
but it's an energy exchange, really, isn't it? Like
yes,
money for healing, and um, so with the men's group stuff, I'm trying to. I feel myself going off on a tangent here, but trying to understand how to navigate those kind of things, because
yeah,
I just want to give it. I just want people to get to where they need to be, like you say, to be able to define their purpose, to be able to feel present in their body with themselves, so that they can show up powerfully in their relationships. Heal the next generation,
yeah,
provide strong family structures for the next generation, so that we can break these transgenerational patterns of trauma.
yeah.
And yeah, so I'm excited for the future. I really am. I think there's going to be there's going to be some madness and chaos, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we're already in it,
of
but
course.
people like ourselves need to edge on the side of hope, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, Ewan, I just want to thank you again for coming on here and having this conversation, sharing your own story of, where it started and your journey and the work you're doing. It's amazing. So I love everything you post on Instagram. It shows, it's, I look at it, I'm like, I don't know if I can post that. This guy is really vulnerable, but it does help because it helps others feel, you know, being able to open up as well. So thank you for doing all that. And I guess for listeners that want to get a hold of you or find you, whether it's online or social media, what are some of the
Yeah.
ways they can find you?
Okay, yeah, just jump on my Instagram at Ewan_Corlett. Easiest way, reach out for on the DMs there, or there'll be a link on there which will take you to my website, and if you're interested in how I provide counselling, therapy, coaching, get in touch. And if you want to join the men's group,
Yeah,
I've still got a few because I've only been going for like a month or so with it. And I've still got a few spaces left. So if you're listening to this and you're interested, pop me a message, and I can get you the agreements. We can have a conversation, see if it might be the right fit for you.
sure. Yeah, when I post this episode, I'll definitely include that in the notes of how to find all of that. So that would be great.
Cool.
Again, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Time
Likewise.
just flew by. So yeah, thanks again for doing this. I'm really grateful.
You're welcome, Furkan. Pleasure, man.
Well, that's the end of the episode. Thank you again for tuning in. As always, please leave a 5-star review. And until next week.